Welcome to the Friday edition of Juan's World, where I talk about various topics from philosophy, religion, and so forth. And today I want to talk about the appropriation in the Western world of certain Buddhist traditions, and particularly meditation, but also mindfulness. And my initial thought is that most people try to adopt some of these traditions because they think they'll be helpful. And sure, okay, if you want to have a dabble at them, it's okay. But what disturbs me a little is that most of the people who purvey these traditions are doing it for money and they don't really understand the depths of what it is they're purveying. A simple way to think about it would be to think about being a Christian missionary in some country that doesn't know much about Christianity, and to hold seminars and say, well, I'll teach you about Christianity, I'll teach you about concepts of forgiveness and sin and salvation. And it won't cost you too much. I'll maybe sell you some literature and you'll have to pay me for my seminars, but you'll learn about it. And my suspicion is that a lot of people will be intrigued and maybe even fork over money, but the person who's selling Christianity is doing it for the wrong reasons. That Christianity is free. And the fact of the matter is that Buddhism is also free, and meditation is free. The problem is that you have to go to India or to Myanmar or Cambodia or some other Buddhist country and go to a monastery or an ashram, and a lot of people don't want to do that, and so they rather just pay somebody in the United States to teach them. And most of the time, the people who are doing the teaching do not understand what it is they're teaching. So let's talk about all of that. I'm probably going to spend several weeks on Buddhism and Buddhist concepts. And I'll start by mentioning that there are many different brands of Buddhism. And I'm mostly going to focus on Theravada Buddhism, which is found in Sri Lanka, Myanmar, and Cambodia, and is the kind of Buddhism that I know most about, which is not much, but more than I know about, let's say, Zen, for example. And I'm going to use Pali terms. Pali is a liturgical language from India that is the language used in Theravada Buddhism, and the terms are Pali terms which don't translate very well. I'll start with sati. Sati gets translated into English as mindfulness. Now, mindfulness had a vogue for a while, maybe still knocking around, don't know, haven't been to the United States for a very long time. But I do hear people talking about it and saying, oh, it's wonderful and all. And usually they translate the concept as something like being in the moment, or being in the present, which is not really what mindfulness is. Vaguely it is, but not a good translation, and not a good concept. The first thing that is important to understand is that the whole purpose of Buddhism is to see the self as an illusion, and that the purpose of Buddhism is to become aware of a certain kind of consciousness which you can merge with a universal consciousness. And in so doing, you understand that the self is an illusion. It's something that we create to make sense out of the world, but it has numerous problems, including desire. And that one of the purposes of Buddhism is to get rid of desire. You get rid of desire by getting rid of the self also, because desire is the cause of suffering. Now, in the general sort of Western translation of mindfulness, it becomes a self-help process, which, as you can see in itself, is paradoxical. You can't have self-help when the purpose is to get rid of the self. You don't want to help the self, you want to eradicate it. So, in its own terms, it's paradoxical. A lot of people that I enjoy reading call this kind of mindfulness Mac mindfulness. That is a kind of fast food version of Buddhism. And I mean, I like that idea because, like, McDonald's makes hamburgers that are appealing in some ways, but they're not anywhere near as good as the hamburgers that you can make yourself when you get your own ground beef or grind it yourself and mix it up with various things and grill it yourself and grill a bun, of course. You must grill buns. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that McDonald's is just a quick and easy and cheap way of getting something that could be an awful lot better. And mindfulness is of the same order. It's a cheap, quick, and easy way of getting something that is much deeper, much more profound, and much more satisfying in the long run. Now, in the Theravada Buddhist tradition, in order to acquire mindfulness, you must meditate. And meditation is also greatly misunderstood in the Western world. It tends to be equated with something that I would call contemplation. Now, I like contemplation a lot. Contemplation involves thinking, sitting alone, being quiet, being tranquil, finding a topic that you want to explore, and exploring it solely in its own terms by itself in quiet and solitude. That's something I do a lot, and I have no objections to it at all. But contemplation is not meditation. In some ways, I think of meditation and contemplation as diametric opposites, because contemplation is about thinking, and usually it's about logical thinking. I have a problem I want to solve. Sometimes it's a life problem, or sometimes it's an academic problem. And I'll sit very quietly and logically go over the steps that will help me find a resolution to the problem. All fine. Meditation requires not thinking. And that's the part that's really hard, and in fact is the part that I don't do very well. In order to learn meditation technique, you really have to go and live in a monastery, and you have to have a teacher in the monastery who will teach you about meditation technique. And that's what monks do in Theravada Buddhist monasteries. They spend most of their day in meditation. Now, sometimes they spend days and days on end. During particular times in the Buddhist calendar, they spend sometimes 2 or 3 days doing nothing but meditation. They'll eat one time in the day, and the rest of the day they'll spend in meditation. Now, I want to be fair here. There are a lot of people who become monks in Myanmar and Cambodia because it's an easy life in certain ways. I mean, it's not a terribly easy life in the fact that you have to be poor and you have to spend a certain amount of the day walking the streets begging for food and so forth. But you have a bed and you have food and a place to wash and sleep, and so a lot of people think that's okay. And both in Myanmar and Cambodia these days, everybody is required to be a monk for a certain period of time. They usually start as children and continue into young adulthood, but they're short periods. For example, Cambodian children will be able to be monks during their summer holidays, and then they go back to school, and they get the general experience and they get the general idea. I know plenty of monks, or I've met plenty of monks, who are perfectly secular. I met one not long ago as I was taking photographs of a temple, and he was hiding among the stupas smoking a cigarette, because he's not supposed to do that, but he wanted to just go off and have a smoke. And I know others who have smartphones and they're always on them. They're not really participating in Buddhism, and they're not probably doing much in the way of real meditation, because real meditation is hard. And the first thing that is important to understand is that it involves getting rid of thoughts, being able to clear your mind so that you can see yourself in a way from the outside. You can understand what it is that your body and your senses and your mind are doing. Now just imagine that for a minute. Like, how can you use your mind to investigate how your mind is operating? the principle is that if you can understand that, you can overcome the workings of the mind itself. Well, one of the ways to do it is to concentrate on a single thing and get rid of anything else that's in your mind. So, like, for example, one of my ways of meditating is to look deeply into a candle and to have the candle be the only thing that is in my consciousness. Another way you can do it is to focus on your breathing. Just concentrate on the action of breathing in and breathing out. And a third way is by using some kind of mantra, where you are focusing only on the physical properties of the sound, like Om. Just repeat Om, repeat it. You can do it out loud or you can do it silently. Now, in Pali, there are two words for the objectives of meditation. One is samantha, and samantha means tranquility or serenity. It's calming everything down. And the other is vipassana, which is insight, which is what I was talking about before. Insight into how things work, but looking in a way from the outside, you could kind of imagine that an out-of-body experience would be a form of vipassana, where you are looking down in yourself and you are understanding the limitations of the self from the outside. And this awareness involves 5 khandhas, that is 5 forms or 5 components of a person. They are rupa, which is the body, so that if you're focusing on your breathing, that would be a way of concentrating on the body. Vedana, which is sensations, the typical senses in the Western world of hearing, taste. But again, looking at them from the outside, trying to understand the essence of taste, not the taste of things, but how we taste. The third is samjhana, which is perceptions, different from sensations, and sankhana, which is thinking, mental activity, and vijnana, which is consciousness. To me, very interesting way of breaking down the nature of being human. From an anthropological point of view, obviously, I'm very interested in the ways in which cultures view what it is to be human. So, in order to do this, you have to clear your mind. You have to make your mind a kind of void, which in everyday life is full of stuff, paying the bills, getting to work, looking after the kids, making sure they get to school, all of those things. And the end point of Buddhism is to clear yourself of all of those distractions, so that mindfulness is not about being in the moment or being present or something like that. It's clearing yourself of everything, past, present, and future. it's not being in any moment. So, yes, you should certainly have times when you stop thinking about paying the bills or getting to work on time and all that. Those are all distractions. But they're not really the point of mindfulness. Mindfulness, or sati, is not about becoming like more efficient or even necessarily being calmer in a sort of Western sense. The kind of tranquility that comes from mindfulness is completely transcendent of the world. And there we get to an area that is somewhat akin to a certain kind of Christianity. And I will leave that as a kind of cliffhanger. I will talk about that next time. How, in a way, Christianity had a similar kind of trajectory, but went completely off the rails a long time ago. We're talking about in the 1st and 2nd century. They were on a particular path, but then culture took over. And that's one of the problems that I'm going to try to highlight in future weeks, is how certain basic principles of Buddhism and of Christianity can easily be converted or perverted by culture, because people are really resistant to those deep ideas. And why they're resistant is also something that I want to talk about. So for the moment, I will leave you with that cliffhanger, and you can like and subscribe. And I have no idea what I'm going to be cooking on Tuesday, but I'll be at the supermarket at some point over the weekend, and I'll let you know.